Prologue: Shadows of the North. In the vast, untamed expanse of Alaska, where the land whispers secrets to those who dare to listen, the boundary between myth and reality blurs like fog over a frozen lake. The indigenous peoples of these lands, the Athabascans, the Inuit, have long told stories of the spirit wolves, ethereal beings who walk the line between worlds. They are guardians, protectors of the veil that separates the mortal realm from the shadows beyond. But in an age of science and skepticism, such tales are relegated to campfire lore, dismissed by outsiders like Elias Thorne. Elias was no stranger to isolation. Born in the bustling streets of Seattle, he had climbed the corporate ladder only to watch it crumble beneath him. A bitter divorce, a soul-crushing job in tech sales, it all led him north to a ramshackle cabin on the banks of the Yukon River. For 10 years, he had carved out a life here, trapping for sustenance, fishing through thick ice, and guiding wide-eyed tourists during the brief summers. The wilderness had hardened him, but it had also hollowed him out, leaving a void that no amount of solitude could fill. Little did he know on that fateful February night that his act of mercy would ignite a chain of events that would drag him into the heart of ancient mysteries, forcing him to confront not just the shadows of the wild, but the darkness within himself.
Before I continue, write in the comments where you're watching me from, your city or country. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like if this story touches you.
Chapter 1: The Frozen Sentinel. The Alaskan wilderness in mid-February was a realm unto itself, a frozen kingdom where the line between life and death was as thin as the ice on the Yukon River. The air bit like 1,000 tiny needles, and the wind carried the mournful cries of distant ravens, echoing through the endless expanse of snow-blanketed pines. Elias Thorne had called this place home for a decade, but even after all these years, it never failed to remind him of his own insignificance. He was a speck in the vast white canvas, a man who had fled the chaos of civilization only to find a different kind of turmoil in the solitude. Elias was 45, though the harsh elements had etched lines into his face that made him look a decade older. His beard, thick and unkempt, was streaked with gray, matching the underbrush that clung stubbornly to the riverbanks. His eyes, a piercing blue, had witnessed the raw brutality of nature, avalanches that buried trails in seconds, blizzards that turned the world into a swirling void, and the quiet starvation of animals too weak to survive the winter. He had come here from Seattle, escaping a life that had crumbled like a house of cards, a failed marriage to Sarah, who had left him for his slick-talking boss at the tech firm where he slaved away selling software to indifferent corporations. The divorce had stripped him of everything: his home, his savings, his self-respect. In the city, he was just another cog in the machine. Here, in the bush, he was the master of his fate, or so he told himself. His cabin was a sturdy log structure, built by hand with timber felled from the surrounding forest. It sat on a slight rise overlooking the Yukon, insulated with sod and moss to ward off the cold. Inside, it was sparse: a wood-burning stove that doubled as a cooktop, a bunk bed piled with furs, shelves lined with canned goods and trapping gear, and a single armchair where he spent evenings nursing a flask of whiskey, staring into the flames. The tourists he guided in summer paid well enough to keep him supplied, but winter was his true domain, trapping beaver and fox for pelts, fishing through ice holes for grayling and pike. It was a life of rhythm, of survival, but lately the isolation had begun to weigh heavier. Dreams plagued him, fragmented memories of Sarah's laughter turning to accusations, shadows lurking at the edges of his vision. That morning, Elias had risen before dawn, the cabin's interior barely warmer than the outside. He stoked the fire, boiled water for coffee, and checked his gear. The trap lines needed tending. He had set them along the river's tributaries, baited with scraps to lure the wary creatures. Bundling up in layers, thermal underwear, wool pants, a parka lined with coyote fur, and heavy boots, he stepped out into the pre-dawn gloom. The snow crunched underfoot, a satisfying sound in the otherwise silent world. His snowmobile, a reliable Yamaha with studded tracks for gripping the ice, roared to life, shattering the quiet. As he sped along the frozen river, the aurora borealis began its nightly dance. Ribbons of green and purple unfurled across the sky like the spirits of ancestors watching over the land. Elias had heard the local Athabascan elders in Tanana speak of them as omens, portals to other realms where the dead walked with the living. He dismissed them as folklore, but tonight the lights seemed unusually vivid, pulsing with an energy that made the hairs on his neck stand up. "Just the cold playing tricks," he muttered, his voice lost in the engine's hum. The first trap was empty, a disappointment but not expected. Winter made animals cautious. He reset it, burying the wire snare deeper in the snow. Moving on, he traversed a narrow ravine where the wind funneled like a tunnel, whipping snow into his face. Visibility dropped, and for a moment he thought he heard a howl, not the usual wolf call, but something deeper, more primal. Shaking it off, he pressed forward. It was near the river's bend, where the Yukon widened into a shallow bay frozen solid, that he spotted the anomaly. A dark hump protruded from the ice, partially buried in a drift. At first, Elias assumed it was a log, washed up and encased during a recent thaw-freeze cycle, but as he drew closer, throttling down the snowmobile, he saw movement, a subtle shift, accompanied by a faint, pitiful whine that pierced the silence like an arrow. Heart quickening, Elias killed the engine. The sudden quiet was oppressive, broken only by the wind's whisper and his own breathing that fogged the air in thick plumes. He approached cautiously, hat in hand, not for attack but habit. The shape resolved into something alive, a wolf, a massive gray timber wolf, its body trapped in a thick sheath of ice. The animal's fur was matted with frost, clumped in icy spikes, and its golden eyes flickered weakly, barely open. One hind leg was twisted grotesquely, bone protruding slightly through torn flesh, blood frozen in crimson rivulets on the snow. Elias froze, his breath catching. Wolves were kings here, revered and feared. He had seen packs from afar, their howls a symphony that sent shivers down his spine. The locals told stories of spirit wolves, guardians of the forest, shapeshifters who protected ancient secrets. He laughed them off over beers at the village bar, but now, face to face with this dying beast, doubt crept in. The wolf's eyes locked onto his, not with aggression, but with a plea that transcended words. It was as if the animal was reaching out, imploring him for mercy. "Who are you?" Elias whispered, kneeling closer. The wolf didn't growl or bare teeth, it merely whimpered again, a sound that tugged at something deep within him. Pity? Loneliness? He thought of Sarah, how she had looked at him in their final argument, eyes filled with a similar desperation. Damn it. He hesitated, weighing the risks. Wolves carried diseases, rabies, parasites, and this one was huge, easily 120 pounds of muscle and fang. But leaving it to die felt wrong, a betrayal of the code he lived by. Survive, but don't be cruel. Pulling off his gloves, exposing hands to the numbing cold, he gripped the hatchet. Easy, boy, I'm not here to hurt you. The ice was thick, formed from a fall through a thin crust followed by a flash freeze. Elias chipped carefully, starting at the edges. Each strike sent vibrations through the wolf's body, but it remained still, as if understanding his intent. Sweat beaded on his forehead, freezing instantly. Minutes turned to half an hour. His arms ached, fingers blistered from the handle. As he worked, memories flooded him. Flashback to Seattle, the boardroom where his boss announced the layoffs, Sarah's affair revealed in the same breath. "You're obsolete, Elias," Handman said. Obsolete, like this wolf, trapped by forces beyond control. Another strike and a chunk broke free, revealing more of the wolf's flank. The animal's breathing was labored, steam rising faintly. Suddenly, a crack echoed, not from his hatchet, but the ice beneath. The river's surface groaned, a reminder of its treachery. Elias paused, heart pounding. If the ice gave way, they'd both plunge into the hypothermic depths. "Hold on," he urged, as much to himself as the wolf. Resuming, he freed the torso first, then the legs. The broken one made him wince, branch fracture, bone white against red. Wrapping the wolf in his thermal blanket, he heaved it onto the sled. The effort left him gasping, muscles screaming. The wolf's eyes never left his, a silent thank you or warning. The return trip was agonizingly slow. Snow began falling thicker, visibility near zero. Elias navigated by memory, the aurora.
Chapter 2: Awakening Echoes. The days immediately following the rescue blurred into a hazy rhythm of vigilance, routine, and an undercurrent of unease that Elias couldn't quite shake. The cabin, once a sanctuary of solitary predictability, now felt alive with a new presence, one that was both comforting and profoundly eerie. The wolf, whom Elias had dubbed Shadow for the way it seamlessly blended into the dim, flickering corners of the room like a living extension of the darkness itself, had become an unexpected companion. Shadow didn't pace or whine like a wild animal caged. Instead, it observed with a quiet intensity, its golden eyes reflecting the firelight in a manner that suggested depths far beyond mere instinct. Elias woke each morning to the sound of his own breathing, heavy and labored from the previous night's exertions, and the soft, rhythmic inhalations of Shadow lying on the pile of furs by the hearth. The first day after the rescue, he had half expected the wolf to be gone, slipped out through some crack in the door during the night, back to the wild where it belonged. But there it was, still and watchful, the splinted leg extended awkwardly but showing no signs of infection. Elias approached cautiously, a bowl of thawed venison in hand. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. Shadow's ears twitched, but it allowed him to come close, accepting the meat with gentle snaps of its jaws. No aggression, no fear, just that unwavering gaze. As he tended to the animal, changing bandages and checking the wound, Elias marveled at the rate of healing. What should have been a gruesome, slow mending break, compound fracture, exposed bone, the kind that would fell a lesser creature for weeks or end it altogether, seemed to knit itself back together with unnatural speed. By the second day, the swelling had subsided dramatically, the fur beginning to regrow over the scar tissue in soft, silvery tufts. Elias poked at it gently, earning a low rumble that wasn't quite a growl. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" he said, half to himself. He chalked it up to the wolf's raw resilience, the kind forged in the crucible of the Alaskan wild. But deep down, a nagging doubt whispered, this wasn't normal. Wolves healed fast, sure, but not like this. It was as if some invisible force was accelerating the process, weaving flesh and bone with threads of mystery. The routine settled in like fresh snow. Elias rose at dawn, stoked the fire until the cabin filled with the comforting crackle of wood smoke and the scent of wood smoke. He'd brew coffee, strong, black, the way he liked it to cut through the fog of isolation, and prepare simple meals, oatmeal thickened with dried berries or strips of jerky chewed thoughtfully while planning the day's tasks. With Shadow immobile at first, Elias confined his activities to the immediate vicinity of the cabin. He chopped wood from the stack outside, the axe biting into frozen logs with satisfying thuds, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Occasionally, he'd glance back through the window, catching Shadow's eyes following his every move. It was unsettling, that intelligence, like the wolf was studying him, cataloging his habits. By the third day, Shadow began to shift positions, testing the leg with tentative weight. Elias watched from his armchair, a worn leather relic salvaged from a junk sale in Tanana, nursing a mug of whiskey-laced tea as the sun dipped low, painting the snow outside in hues of orange and pink. The cabin's interior was a cozy cocoon, walls lined with shelves of tinned goods, trapping tools hanging from hooks, a rifle propped by the door for quick access against bears or intruders. But now, with Shadow there, the space felt smaller, more intimate. Elias found himself talking more than he had in years, filling the silence with fragments of his past. It started small, a comment here, a mutter there, but soon it poured out like a river thawing in spring. "You know, back in Seattle, I thought I had it all figured out," he said one afternoon, while mending a tear in his parka by the firelight. Shadow lay with its head on its paws, ears perked. A nice house in the suburbs, white picket fence bullshit. Sarah, my wife, ex-wife now, she was the one who wanted all that. I was just along for the ride. Worked my ass off at that tech firm, selling software to companies that didn't give a damn. "Elias, close the deal," they'd say, and I did, until I didn't. He paused, needle pausing mid-stitch. Shadow tilted its head slightly, as if urging him on. Elias chuckled bitterly. "She left me for my boss, can you believe it? Said I was distant, unambitious. Hell, I was just tired. The city chews you up, spits you out. So I came here, to this godforsaken paradise. No bosses, no betrayals, just me and the wild." Shadow's response was a soft huff, almost like understanding. Elias shook his head. "Now I'm talking to a wolf. Great. Next I'll be seeing ghosts." But the conversations continued, becoming a catharsis. He'd recount childhood memories, growing up in a rainy Pacific Northwest town, fishing with his grandfather who told tall tales of the North. Gramps used to say there were spirits in the woods, wolves that walked like men. Crazy old coot. Shadow's eyes would gleam, and for a fleeting moment, Elias swore he saw a flicker of recognition. As the days stretched, minor oddities began to accumulate, heightening the eerie atmosphere. Objects seemed to shift slightly when Elias wasn't looking. A knife on the table moved an inch, a fur blanket draped over Shadow appearing neatly folded. At first, he blamed drafts or his own forgetfulness, but one evening, as he prepared dinner, a log in the fire popped unusually loud, sending sparks dancing like fireflies.
Shadow's fur bristled, and Elias felt a chill unrelated to the temperature. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. The wolf merely stared, unblinking. Nights were the worst, or perhaps the most vivid. Sleep came fitfully, plagued with dreams that felt more like visions than subconscious ramblings. The first night after the rescue, Elias dreamed of a vast pack of wolves racing across a frozen plain under the swirling aurora. Their howls harmonized with the wind, a symphony of ancient power. As he watched from an impossible vantage, the wolves began to shift, forms elongating, fur receding to reveal human limbs, faces etched with tribal markings. They danced around a glowing veil, a shimmering barrier that pulsed like a heartbeat. One wolfman turned to him, eyes golden and familiar. "The dead awakens," he whispered, voice echoing in his mind. He woke in a sweat, the cabin's warmth oppressive. A lingering chill clung to his skin, as if frost had seeped into his bones. Shadow was awake, watching him. "Bad dream," Elias grunted, throwing more wood on the fire. But the dreams escalated. On the second night, he was among the pack, running on all fours, the thrill of the hunt coursing through his body. Prey fled before them, shadowy figures that morphed into people from his past. Sarah, his boss, even his grandfather. The chase ended at a chasm where the veil tore slightly, dark tendrils leaking through. "Restore the balance," the wolfman urged. By the fourth night, the dreams turned nightmarish. Elias found himself trapped in ice, much like Shadow had been, unable to move as Shadow's whispered temptations, power to reclaim his old life, revenge on those who wronged him. He woke, gasping, fingers numb with cold, despite the roaring fire. Shadow padded over, nuzzling his hand gently, a gesture unwolf-like that sent shivers down his spine. "You're not just an animal, are you?" Elias whispered. The wolf's eyes seemed to say no. The healing progressed miraculously. By the fifth day, Shadow stood fully, limping only slightly as it explored the cabin's confines. The leg, once twisted and broken, now bore but a faint scar beneath the regrown fur. Elias removed the splint, marveling at the smooth bone beneath. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you were magic." Shadow responded with a low whine, almost playful. Emboldened by the wolf's recovery, Elias ventured out for a short trapping run, leaving Shadow inside. The snow had stopped, leaving a crisp layer that sparkled under the midday sun. He checked a nearby line, finding a beaver caught in the snare, fresh pelt for trade. As he worked, skinning the animal with practiced efficiency, he felt eyes on him. Glancing back, he saw Shadow at the window, silhouette stark against the glass. But more unsettling, a group of ravens perched on the cabin roof, cawing in unison, their beady eyes fixed on him. Ravens were common, but this felt orchestrated, like sentinels. Returning with the pelt, Elias found Shadow waiting by the door, tail wagging faintly, a dog's gesture on a wolf's frame. "Miss me?" he joked, but the unease grew. That afternoon, as he prepared his rifle, a sudden gust rattled the shutters, though the weather outside was calm. Whisters seemed to ride the wind, indistinct words like pact and veil. Elias froze, rifle in hand. "Hello?" No answer, but Shadow growled softly, hackles raised. The culmination came on a stormy evening, the 6th day. Sleet hammered the roof like
Chapter 3: Trails of Frost and Fire. Dawn broke over the Alaskan wilderness with a crisp clarity that belied the turmoil brewing in Elias Thorne's soul. The sun rose as a pale, watery orb in the Arctic sky, casting long shadows across the snow-blanketed landscape and gilding the tips of the pine trees in faint gold. The air was biting, each breath a sharp reminder of the cold that now seemed to linger not just outside, but within him. Elias stood in the doorway of his cabin, steam rising from his mug of black coffee as he surveyed the scene.
The events of the previous night replayed in his mind like a fever dream. The telepathic voice, the shimmering vision of a man in wolf pelts, the frost creeping up his arms. Was it real, or had the isolation finally cracked him? He shook his head, forcing himself into action. There was no time for doubt. The wolf, Kale, waited patiently outside, its gray fur ruffled slightly by the gentle breeze, golden eyes fixed at Elias with an expectant calm. The animal sat like a sentinel, unmoving, as if it had all the time in the world. Elias glanced back at the cabin, his home for a decade, wondering if he'd ever see it again. "All right, let's get this over with," he muttered, setting the mug down and beginning the packing process. The snowmobile, his trusty steed in this frozen realm, was already fueled and ready. Elias methodically loaded it with supplies, each item a calculated choice born from years of bush survival. Rations first, dried venison strips, hardtack biscuits, energy bars scavenged from tourist leftovers, and a few cans of beans for variety. He packed them into waterproof bags, strapping them securely to the sled attachment. Ammunition next, boxes of .308 rounds for his rifle, a Remington 700 slung over his shoulder, and shells for the shotgun in case of close encounters. "Never know what we'll run into," he said aloud, though whether to himself or Kale, he wasn't sure. The tent was a compact 4-season model, rated for sub-zero temperatures, rolled tightly and tied down. Sleeping bag, thermal pads, a portable stove with fuel canisters, a first aid kit expanded with extra bandages and painkillers. Elias ticked them off mentally. He added a flare gun, signaling mirror, and a satellite phone, though reception in the deep wilds was spotty at best. Finally, personal items, a flask of whiskey for the cold nights, a worn photo of his grandfather tucked into his pocket, and a journal he hadn't written in for months. As he worked, Kale observed silently, but Elias felt Kale's presence in his mind, a subtle pressure like an unspoken question. "Why the hell am I doing this?" Elias grumbled, cinching the last strap. "Talking wolves, ancient packs, sounds like a bad movie." But the memory of the frost on his skin silenced his protests. He mounted the snowmobile, revving the engine to life. It roared, a mechanical beast awakening, and Kale arose gracefully, shaking off a dusting of snow. With a nod that seemed almost human, the wolf loped forward, leading the way. They set off into the uncharted wilderness, the snowmobile's tracks carving fresh paths through the pristine snow. Kale ran alongside with supernatural ease, his powerful strides matching the machine's pace effortlessly, as if gravity and fatigue were mere suggestions. The landscape unfolded like a living tapestry, vast expanses of frozen tundra giving way to dense forests of snow-laden pines, their branches bowing under the weight, like weary sentinels. The Yukon River, now a distant silver ribbon, snaked through the valleys, its surface cracked and frozen into jagged mosaics. As they delved deeper, the terrain grew more rugged. Frozen lakes gleamed like enormous mirrors, reflecting the pale sky and the occasional flock of ravens wheeling overhead. Ravines sliced through the earth, their depths echoing with the mournful cries of wind funneled through narrow passages, sounding like the wails of lost souls. Elias gripped the handlebars tighter, the vibration numbing his hands despite his gloves. The cold seeped in, but it was more than weather. It was the curse, a subtle chill that whispered of impending doom. To distract himself, Elias shouted over the engine's roar. "So, what's your story, Kale? You said you're a guardian or something?" The response came not as sound, but a warm flood in his mind, telepathic and intimate. "We Lupari are born of primordial unions, Elias, man and wolf fused by the gods of old, in the time when the world was young and the veil was newly woven. We are the sentinels at the threshold, guarding against incursions from the shadow realm, shadows that hunger for the light of your world, twisting it into nightmare." Elias swerved around a snowdrift, processing the words. "Gods? Veil? Sounds like mythology. Greek or Norse or what?" "Older than those tales," Kale replied, his mental voice carrying a timbre of ancient forests and howling men's. "The indigenous peoples here, the Athabascans, the Inuit, know fragments. They call us spirit wolves, walkers between worlds. We shift forms to protect the balance. Without us, the shadows would flood through, bringing chaos, endless night, madness in men's hearts, beasts unbound. The journey stretched into hours, the sun climbing higher but offering little warmth. They crossed a frozen lake, the ice groaning under the snowmobile's weight. Elias's heart skipped as a crack spiderwebbed outward, but Cale's voice urged, "Steady, the ice holds." Trusting the wolf, he accelerated, reaching the far shore safely. "Why me?" Elias shouted again, the question burning since the night before. "I'm nobody, a washed-up salesman turned trapper. Why drag me into this?" "Your lineage echoes ours," Cale answered. "Your ancestor, Jonah Thorne, aided a Lupari during the Gold Rush era. He saved one of our kind from human hunters in the Klondike, sharing blood in a ritual that bound your bloodline to ours. Fate weaves strange threads. You are the unlikely chosen." Elias's mind reeled. He recalled faded family tales told around holiday tables in his youth. His great-grandfather Jonah, a prospector who vanished in the Yukon during the 1898 rush, presumed dead in the wilds, but he returned years later, changed, quieter, with eyes that saw too much, spinning yarns of ghost wolves and hidden treasures, not of gold, but of spirit. The family dismissed them as delirium from hardship, but Elias's grandfather had kept a journal, yellowed pages filled with sketches of wolfmen and veiled portals. Crazy old stories, Elias had thought, but now they resonated with truth. As the day waned, fatigue set in. The snowmobile's engine droned on, but Elias's arms ached, his eyes stung from the glare. They pushed until dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and oranges. Cale led them to a cave overlooking a vast valley, its entrance partially obscured by an overhang of icicles with crystalline fangs. "Good spot," Elias said, dismounting and unpacking the tent, but Cale nudged him toward the cave. Safer within, the wild watches. Inside, the cave was dry and sheltered, the walls etched with natural formations that resembled ancient runes. Elias built a small fire from scavenged wood, the flames dancing shadows across the stone. As they ate, Elias his rations, Cale a hare it had caught with blinding speed, the aurora borealis ignited the night sky outside, ribbons of green and violet weaving like living silk. Cale settled by the fire, eyes reflecting the lights. "In ages past we fought great battles," he shared telepathically, images flashing in Elias's mind, epic clashes with shadowy horrors, Lupari in wolf and human forms wielding ethereal weapons. The shadow realm presses ever closer. The traitor, my brother Thorne, seeks to rule both sides, forging alliances with the dark. Elias listened, mesmerized, the whiskey from his flask warming him. Exhaustion claimed him soon after, curled in his sleeping bag. Dreams came swiftly, shadows coiling around him, offering power. Visions of Sarah begging forgiveness, his old boss ruined, wealth beyond measure. "Take it," they whispered. "Break the pact." He awoke thrashing, ice crusting his eyelashes, a deep chill in his chest. "The curse progresses," Cale warned grave. "We must hurry." They broke camp at first light, the journey resuming with renewed urgency. The second day brought perils that tested their bond. A sudden blizzard descended, visibility dropping to 0 in minutes. Snow whipped like daggers, the wind a roaring beast. Elias slowed, blinded. "Trust me," Cale urged. "Follow my path." Telepathic guidance led him. Left now, avoid the drift. They navigated the whiteout, emerging as the storm abated. Later, a crevasse yawned before them, hidden under fresh powder. The snowmobile plunged, Elias yelling as it teetered. Cale leapt, jaws clamping his sleeve, pulling with superhuman strength. Together they hauled it back, hearts pounding. In a clearing ringed by ancient pines, they encountered the spectral baiter, a massive shadow beast, eyes glowing red, form translucent yet solid. It charged, roar shaking the ground. Cale fought with bursts of ethereal light, claws slashing ectoplasm. Elias fired, bullets phasing through until Cale shouted mentally, "Aim for the heart, infuse your will." Channeling desperation, Elias's shot struck true, banishing it in a wail. Panting, they shared a look. Bond deepened. The trials forged them anew, the trails of frost and fire leading ever deeper into mystery. Chapter 4: The Veil's Threshold. The third day of their arduous journey dawned with a deceptive serenity, the sky a vast canvas of muted grays and blues, unbroken by clouds, but heavy with the promise of more trials ahead. Elias Thorne's body ached from the relentless push through the wilderness, muscles strained from gripping the snowmobile's handlebars, eyes bleary from scanning the horizon for hidden dangers, and a persistent chill that no amount of layered clothing could fully repel. The curse, that insidious frost woven into his very essence, had grown more insistent, manifesting now not just as numbness in his extremities, but as fleeting visions of ice encasing his heart, slowing its beat. Kale, the enigmatic wolf at his side, loped onward with tireless grace, his gray fur dusted with fresh snow, golden eyes ever vigilant. They had covered ground that no map could chart, delving into regions where the land itself seemed alive with ancient secrets. The previous day's perils, the blinding blizzard, the yawning crevasse, the spectral bear, had forged a reluctant alliance between man and beast, each saving the other in moments of dire need. Elias, once skeptical and solitary, now found himself attuned to Kale's telepathic nudges, a silent communication that guided them through the maze of frozen ravines and shadowed forests. But fatigue was a cunning foe, and as the sun climbed higher, Elias's thoughts wandered to doubts. Was this quest madness, or the redemption he never sought? As midday approached, the landscape shifted dramatically. The flat tundra gave way to jagged foothills, precursors to the distant Brooks Range, where snow-capped peaks pierced the sky like the spines of slumbering giants. Kale's pace quickened, a subtle excitement radiating through their mental link. "We draw near," the wolf intoned, his voice in Elias's mind carrying a reverence that bordered on awe. "The Veil's threshold awaits, the gateway to our sanctum." Elias throttled down the snowmobile, scanning ahead. What he saw stole his breath. A massive waterfall, frozen in mid-cascade, its waters suspended in time as if captured by some divine artist. The ice glittered like a veil of diamonds, refracting the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of colors, emerald greens, sapphire blues, and fiery oranges that danced across the surface. It towered over them, a massive natural monument, hundreds of feet high, the roar of hidden underground flows muffled to a distant rumble. Mist from geothermal vents below rose in wispy tendrils, adding an ethereal haze that blurred the edges between reality and myth. "Is this it?" Elias asked, killing the engine and dismounting. His boots crunched on the snow, and he approached cautiously, the air growing warmer, almost humid, as if the earth itself breathed life into this frozen spectacle. "Indeed," Kale replied, padding forward. "The hidden den lies beyond, but entry is not granted lightly." Kale tilted his head back, his chest expanding as he drew in a deep breath. Then a howl erupted from his maw, not the wild cry of a lone predator, but a resonant melody that vibrated through the air, harmonizing with the wind and echoing off the ice. It was a song of ancient power, notes rising and falling in a cadence that seemed to speak to the very soul of the land. Elias felt the sound in his bones, a tingling that awakened something primal within him. The frozen waterfall responded. Cracks appeared in the ice, not shattering, but parting like curtains drawn aside by invisible hands. Shards of frost cascaded down in a gentle shower, revealing a cavernous entrance aglow with an inner light. Steam billowed out, carrying the scent of minerals and earth, warm and inviting against the outer cold. "After you?" Elias said, half jokingly, but his voice trembled with anticipation.
Kale led the way, and Elias followed, pushing the snowmobile through the opening before the ice resealed behind them with a soft, sealing crunch. Inside, the cavern was a marvel that defied the harsh world above. The walls were veined with quartz crystals that pulsed with a soft bioluminescent glow, illuminating the space in hues of blue and violet. Runes, ancient symbols etched into the stone, shimmered faintly, as if alive, telling stories of epochs long past. Geothermal pools dotted the floor, their waters steaming and bubbling, releasing vapors that carried healing minerals into the air. The atmosphere was thick with magic, a tangible energy that prickled Elias's skin, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. It was warm here, almost tropical in pockets, a stark contrast to the frozen exterior, sustained by the earth's inner fire. As they ventured deeper, sounds emerged, soft murmurs, the pad of feet, and low growls that resolved into voices. The Lupoi pack greeted them, dozens of wolves materializing from the shadows, their forms shifting fluidly between beast and human. One moment a sleek gray wolf with piercing eyes, the next a tall figure clad in furs and adorned with bone talismans, necklaces of carved ivory and feathers that whispered of shamanic rites. They were a diverse assembly, some with skin tones echoing the indigenous peoples of the north, others with features that seemed drawn from global myths, dark hair, light eyes, builds ranging from light to muscular. Men and women alike, their presence exuded a quiet power, a harmony with the natural world. Elias halted, overwhelmed. "This is your pack?" he asked. "Our kin," Kale affirmed, shifting seamlessly into his human form, a tall, broad-shouldered man with fur-cloaked shoulders and those same golden eyes. The pack circled them, curious but not hostile, murmurs rippling through the group like waves on a pond. One figure stepped forward from the throng, commanding immediate silence. Lyra, the Alpha, was a statuesque woman whose presence filled the cavern like a storm about to break. Her hair was silver-streaked, flowing like a cascade of moonlight, and her eyes were the color of brewing tempests, gray swirling with hints of lightning. She wore a mantle of white wolf fur, adorned with intricate beadwork and feathers that caught the light, and her stance was regal, exuding authority earned through countless battles. "Kale returns," she said, her voice a rich alto that echoed off the walls, laced with both relief and suspicion. "And with a mortal in tow? The air hums with the Pact's binding. Explain yourself, brother." Kale bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. "The curse ensnared me, Sister Alpha. This man, Elias Thorne, freed me from the eternal ice. In doing so, he invoked the ancient debt. The veil thins. Thorne's betrayal accelerates it. We seek the hidden den's wisdom and aid." Lyra's gaze pierced Elias, assessing him like a predator sizing up a prey. He felt exposed, as if she could see into his soul, unraveling his doubts, his past pains. "A mortal," she mused, circling him slowly, "bound by blood and fate. The Heartstone is lost, stolen into the shadow realm by Thorne, your kin in name, my wayward son, he who was once our hope, now our betrayer. Without a Heartstone, the veil frays at the edges, shadows leaking through like poison in a well. Chaos stirs, unnatural storms, beasts twisted by darkness, mortals plagued by visions of madness." Elias swallowed hard, the frost in his veins stirring as if in response. "Thorne? Your son? This is getting too weird." Lyra's lips curved in a wry smile. "Irony of fate, human. My son, named for strength, turned to shadow for power. He seeks to rule both realms, allying with the void. The Heartstone anchors the gateway. In corrupted hands, it becomes a key to destruction. You must cross the veil and retrieve it. Only uncorrupted mortal hands, yours, bound by the Pact, can now touch it without succumbing to its taint. Elias balked, stepping back. Me? Cross into some shadow world? I'm not a warrior or a mage. I'm just me. Find someone else. The pack murmured, a low grumble in amusement and doubt. Lyra raised a hand, silencing them. The Pact chooses, not we. Feel the frost in your veins. It compels you as it saves you. Refuse, and it consumes. But know this, the shadow realm tests body and soul, riddles that unravel the mind, illusions that prey on regrets, battles against nightmares made flesh. Prove worthy or perish in the void. Tail placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. We journey together. The bloodline strengthens you. Before Elias could protest further, Lyra led them deeper into the den. The cavern expanded into chambers, one a communal hall where Lupari shared meals.
Chapter 5: Shadows Unveiled. The gateway to the Shadow Realm loomed in the depths of the hidden den, a swirling portal of iridescent light that hummed with an otherworldly energy. It resembled a maelstrom captured in mid-spin, tendrils of azure and silver light twisting inward like the eye of a cosmic storm. The air around it crackled, charged with the scent of ozone and something sharper, the metallic tang of impending doom. Elias Thorne stood before it, his heart pounding like a war drum, the weight of the Lucari Pact's gazes pressing upon him. Lyra, the Alpha, had given her final words of caution. The realm beyond will test not just your flesh, but the core of your being. Shadows feed on doubt. Let resolve be your shield. Kale, in his human form, placed a reassuring hand on Elias's shoulder. We step through together. Remember the Pact. It binds us, strengthens us. His golden eyes gleamed with determination, but Elias caught a flicker of concern, a reminder that even guardians like Kale feared the shadows. Elias nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat. His rifle was slung across his back, ammunition belts heavy with Pact-infused bullets, enchanted by Lupari runes to pierce ethereal foes. The talisman around his neck, a carved bone pendant pulsing faintly, promised to heighten his senses. "Let's do this," he said, voice steadier than he felt. With a deep breath, they stepped forward. The portal engulfed them like a living entity, reality inverting in an instant. Colors bled to negatives, the vibrant blues of the den twisted to sickly greens, whites to blacks, as if the world had been plunged into a photographic darkroom. Gravity tugged sideways, pulling Elias off balance, his stomach lurching as up became down and left became right. Whispers clawed at his sanity, insidious voices murmuring doubts, regrets, temptations. Worthless, abandoned, failure, they hissed, echoing Sarah's parting words, his boss's sneers, his own self-loathing. Elias clenched his fists, focusing on Kale's presence ahead, a beacon in the chaos. They emerged, stumbling into the shadow realm, the portal sealing behind them with a resonant snap. The air was thick, oppressive, carrying a chill that seeped into the soul rather than the skin. Elias gasped, orienting himself. The realm mirrored Alaska in form, but warped in essence. Vast forests stretched before them, but the trees bore ebony leaves that rustled with unnatural whispers, trunks twisted like tormented souls. Rivers flowed not with water, but inky shadows, liquid darkness that gurgled and reached out with tendril-like fingers. The skies churned with amethyst tempests, lightning flashing in silent bursts, illuminating jagged clouds that resembled snarling faces. "This is hell," Elias muttered, his breath visible in plumes despite the lack of cold. "Not hell," Kale corrected telepathically, reverting to wolf form for agility, "but a reflection of it. The shadow realm is the underbelly of your world, where fears manifest and forgotten evils linger. Stay close, the wraiths sense intruders." As if summoned by the words, shapes glided from the ebony foliage, wraiths, hollow-eyed specters with translucent forms that shimmered like heat haze. Their eyes were voids, bottomless pits hungering for life force, and they emitted low moans that vibrated through Elias's chest. One lunged, claw-like extensions extending, and Kale intercepted with a burst of ethereal energy, a radiant light from his maw that dispersed the creature in a shriek. "Shoot them," Kale barked mentally. Elias unslung his rifle, the Pact power infusing the bullets with a faint glow. He aimed at another wraith, the shot cracking like thunder in the muted realm. The bullet struck true, the specter unraveling in wisps of shadow. Adrenaline surged, the weapon felt alive in his hands, guided by an instinct he didn't know he possessed. They pressed on, Kale leading through the warped forest. Ambush after ambush came, wraiths materializing from tree trunks, their forms coalescing from bark and leaf. Kale fended them off with blasts of light, claws rending ethereal flesh, while Elias provided covering fire, his shots now precise, almost prescient. "How am I doing this?" he shouted, reloading amid the chaos. "The Pact evolves you," Kale affirmed, leaping over a shadow river that snapped at his paws. "Your bloodline carries echoes of our power, enhanced strength, intuition. Embrace it." Deeper in, the first major trial loomed, the Sphinx of Echoes. They entered a clearing dominated by a colossal stone guardian, its body a fusion of lion and eagle, face a humanoid mask carved from obsidian. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and as they approached, it stirred, dust casting from its form. "Hail, Halter interlopers," it boomed, voice echoing from all directions, drawing from Elias's regrets to amplify the torment. To pass, solve the riddle, or face oblivion. Elias felt a pull, visions flickering, Sarah's face twisted in accusation. "What is broken, yet mends the broken," the Sphinx intoned, with Elias's inner turmoil. Kale growled, but the Sphinx's gaze fixed on Elias. The mortal answers or both perish. Elias's mind raced, the riddle probing his pains. Broken, his marriage, his life, but mends? Time heals wounds, yet it's shattered by loss. "Time," he whispered, then shouted. "Time, it's broken into moments, yet it mends all things." The Sphinx's eyes dimmed, a grudging nod. "Correct. Pass." But as the path unlocked, a bridge of light spanning a void, the riddle's toll fit. Visions assaulted Elias, reliving his divorce in vivid detail. Sarah's tears, the courtroom's cold finality, his isolation. He staggered, Kale supporting him. "Illusions," the wolf urged. "Release them." Shaken but resolved, they continued. The next trial, the labyrinth of illusions. Walls of shifting mist rose around them, forming a maze where paths twisted impossibly. Scenes from Elias's past played out, betrayals, his boss's smirk as he announced the affair, losses, his grandfather's bedside whispering unfinished tales. "This way is pain," a voice mocked. Elias faltered, but Kale's voice cut through. "Follow my call, confront but do not dwell." Navigating by trust, Elias faced each demon, acknowledging failures, forgiving himself. The labyrinth yielded, walls dissolving. Battles intensified deeper in. Hordes of shadow minions swarmed, grotesque fusions of beast and nightmare, wolves with tentacle mouths, bears with multiple eyes. Elias discovered his abilities, strength to wrestle a minion off Kale, intuition dodging strikes. "I'm changing," he gasped, firing a shot that exploded a foe in shadow shards. "The Pact evolves you," Kale affirmed. Finally, a chasm bridged by illusions, a rickety span over endless void. "Leap with faith," Kale said, crossing first. Elias hesitated, the bridge flickering. Whispers tempted, "Fall, end the pain." But faith in Kale guided him. He jumped, the illusion solidifying underfoot. Exhausted, they pressed on, the realm's heart calling, the betrayer's lair nearer, shadows unveiling deeper mysteries. Chapter 6. Heart of Darkness. The Shadow Realm's oppressive weight bore down on Elias Thorne like an invisible shroud as he and Kale pressed deeper into its twisted heart. The air grew thicker, laden with a miasma of decay and unspoken malice, each breath a labor that filled his lungs with the essence of nightmares. The warped landscape had evolved from eerie forests and illusionary mazes into something more sinister, a barren wasteland punctuated by jagged outcrops of obsidian rock, where the ground pulsed faintly as if alive with malevolent intent. Amethyst storms raged overhead, lightning forking silently across the sky, illuminating the path in flashes of violet fury. Elias's enhanced senses, awakened by the Pact, picked up subtle vibrations, distant howls that weren't quite animal, whispers that teased at the edges of sanity. Kale, in wolf form, led with purposeful strides, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. "We approach the lair," he communicated telepathically, his mental voice a steady anchor amid the chaos. "Thorne's fortress, the epicenter of his betrayal. Steel yourself, Elias. The darkness here is not just shadow, but a living force that preys on weakness." Elias gripped his rifle tighter, the Pact-infused weapon humming with latent power. His body had changed in subtle ways since entering the realm, muscles coiled with newfound strength, reflexes sharpened to a razor's edge, and an intuition that bordered on precognition. Yet doubt lingered, a seed planted by the labyrinth's illusions, watered by exhaustion. "How do we even fight something like this?" he muttered, his voice swallowed by the wind. "Your brother, he's one of you, but twisted." "Thorne was once my kin in spirit as well as blood," Kale replied, a note of sorrow threading his words. Ambitious, fierce, he sought to transcend our role as guardians. He delved too deep into the shadows, forging pacts that corrupted his soul. Now he wields the Heartstone as a weapon, not a ward. But remember, the stone responds to pure intent. Yours may be the key to reclaiming it. As they crested a ridge of fractured obsidian, the fortress loomed into view, a monolithic abomination that defied the laws of physics and sanity. Spires of obsidian ice pierced the storm-racked sky, twisting upward like the fingers of a colossal hand reaching for the heavens, or perhaps clawing at them in defiance. The structure seemed grown rather than built, veins of dark energy pulsing through the ice, casting an eerie, pulsating glow. Shadows writhed along the walls like living entities, coiling and uncoiling, forming fleeting shapes of tormented faces and snarling beasts. The base was encircled by a moat of liquid shadow, bubbling and hissing, from which tendrils occasionally lashed out, grasping at the air. Elias halted, awe and terror warring within him. "That's impossible! How do we even get in?" Kale's form shimmered, shifting to human for strategy. "The shadows guard the entrance, but the Pact grants us passage. Follow my lead, disrupt them with light." He extended a hand, channeling ethereal energy into a radiant orb that hovered like a miniature sun. Elias felt a surge through their bond, his talisman glowing in response. Together they advanced, Kale hurling bursts of light that scattered the tendrils, eliciting shrieks like tearing metal. The moat bridged itself under Kale's command, a path of solidified shadow forming reluctantly. As they crossed, Elias glimpsed horrors below, faces of the damned, mouths agape in silent screams, hands reaching up. One grazed his boot, a chill shooting through him, visions of his failures flashing, Sarah's departure, his life unraveling. He shook it off, firing a shot into the depths, the Pact bullet exploding in a flare that silenced the whispers. The fortress gates, massive slabs of ice etched with corrupting runes, groaned open at their approach, as if the structure itself anticipated the confrontation. Inside, the halls were a labyrinth of darkness, corridors twisting illogically, walls dripping with viscous shadow. Echoes of distant battles reverberated, clashes of light and dark from eons past. Minions patrolled, shadow constructs, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and void eyes. Kale dispatched them with swipes of glowing claws, while Elias provided cover, his shots unraveling their forms. Deeper, they encountered traps, floors that dissolved into pits of oblivion, requiring leaps of faith, illusions of loved ones pleading for mercy, only to attack when approached. Elias faced a spectral Sarah, her form accusing, "You failed me." He hesitated, but Kale's voice cut through. "Illusion, strike true." The shot banished her, leaving Elias shaken, tears freezing on his cheeks. Finally, they reached the throne room, a vast chamber at the core of the fortress, domed with a ceiling of swirling storm clouds, lightning illuminating the scene in strobing flashes. At its center, upon a throne of jagged obsidian, awaited Thorne, a behemoth black wolf, fur absorbing light like a void, eyes burning red with corrupted power. He rose, morphing fluidly into a scarred giant of a man, towering over them, body marred by ritualistic scars that glowed with dark energy. "Brother," Thorne's voice boomed, a gravelly thunder that shook the room, and his mortal lapdog, "How quaint, you've come to witness my ascension." Kale shifted to human, stance defiant. "Thorne, your betrayal ends here. Return the Heartstone, mend the veil before it's too late." Thorne laughed, a sound like cracking ice. "Mend? Fool! The veil is a chain. I will shatter it, rule the merged realms. And you, mortal," he turned to Elias, eyes narrowing, "your bloodline has long tempted me. I whispered to your ancestor Jonah, offered power during his Klondike despair. He resisted, but you carry the weakness. Join me, claim vengeance on those who wronged you." Elias felt the pull, visions of triumph flickering, Sarah begging, wealth overflowing, but he shook his head. "No, I'm here to end this." The clash erupted, epic. Thorne hurled shards of obsidian ice, razor-sharp projectiles whistling through the air. Kale countered with weaves of light, barriers shimmering into existence, deflecting the assault. Their fraternal bond twisted into fury, brothers once united, now opposites in a dance of destruction. Thorne summoned tendrils of darkness, whip-like appendages lashing out, wrapping around Kale, squeezing with crushing force. Elias dodged debris, firing disruptively. His bullets, glowing with Pact energy, struck Thorne's defenses, cracking the ice armor. "You tempted my ancestors?" Elias shouted, anger fueling his aim. "For what? Power?" Thorne roared, revealing more. "To corrupt the bloodline. Mortals like you are keys. Uncorrupted, you seal. Tainted, you open. Jonah resisted, but his descendants weakened. You, broken by loss, were ripe, but now you'll serve or die." The battle intensified. Kale broke free, unleashing a torrent of light that scorched Thorne's side. Thorne retaliated with a shadow wave, knocking Elias back, visions assaulting him, his life's failures replayed in excruciating detail. Gasping, he rose, channeling intuition, a burst of strength propelling him forward. In the pinnacle moment, amid the maelstrom, Elias spotted the Heartstone atop a pedestal, a radiant ruby throbbing with power, corrupted veins of shadow pulsing through it. He dashed, evading tendrils, seizing it. Contact flooded him with visions, cosmic histories unfolding, the Veil's creation, Lupari's oath, realm's delicate balance. His purpose clarified, bridge between worlds, redeemer of bloodline. Thorne charged, form shifting mid-leap to wolf, jaws agape. Kale intercepted, brothers clashing in a whirlwind of fur, fangs, light and shadow. Claws raked, energy exploded. Elias, heart pounding, channeled the stone. A beam of purity erupted, lancing Thorne. The betrayer howled, his form unraveling, banished to oblivion in a vortex of void. Silence fell, the fortress trembling, the Heartstone purified in Elias's grasp, the realm stabilizing. "We did it," Elias breathed, but the cost lingered, visions hinting at greater threats.
Chapter 7. The Price of Balance. The Shadow Realm shuddered as the Heartstone was restored to its rightful place, the radiant ruby's power surging through the fabric of existence like a healing balm applied to a grievous wound. Elias Thorne stood in the crumbling throne room of Thorne's fortress, his hands still tingling from the contact with the ancient artifact. The beam of purity he had channeled had not only banished the betrayer to the oblivion of the void, but had also begun to knit the frayed edges of the veil. Cracks in reality that had allowed shadows to seep through, now sealed with a soft, luminous glow. The amethyst storms overhead calming to a mere royal, the twisted landscape subtly shifting back toward equilibrium. The obsidian spires groaned, fracturing and dissolving into harmless mist, as if the realm itself exhaled in relief. Elias collapsed to one knee, exhaustion crashing over him like a tidal wave. The visions from the Heartstone lingered in his mind, cosmic histories unfolding like an infinite tapestry, the birth of the veil in primordial chaos, the Lupari's eternal vigil, the delicate balance between light and shadow. He saw his own thread in that weave, a mortal bridge spanning realms, his bloodline's legacy not a curse, but a calling. "It's done," he gasped, the ruby now pulsing gently in his grasp, its corruption purged. KL, battered but unbowed, shifted from wolf to human form, his fur receding to reveal bruises and gashes that already began to heal with ethereal light. "The veil mends," he confirmed, his voice a mix of triumph and weariness. "But the Pact demands its due. We must return to the den. The debt awaits repayment." With the Heartstones secured in a protective pouch woven from Lupari magic, they retraced their steps through the stabilizing realm. The wraiths that had hounded them now fled, the shadow minions dissolving into harmless wisps. The portal back to the mortal world shimmered ahead, a welcoming swirl of light. Stepping through felt like emerging from a nightmare into dawn, the warm, rune-lit cavern of the hidden den enveloping them once more. The Lupari pack awaited, their forms a blend of wolf and human, eyes wide with anticipation. Whispers rippled through the assembly as Elias and KL entered, the Heartstone's glow illuminating the crystalline walls. Lyra, the Alpha, stood at the forefront, her silver-streaked hair catching the light like a crown. Her storm-cloud eyes softened with rare approval as she approached. "You return victorious," she declared, her voice resonating through the chamber. "The veil strengthens, the shadows retreat. KL, my steadfast guardian, and Elias Thorne, the unlikely mortal, you have averted catastrophe." The pack erupted in howls and cheers, a symphony of relief that echoed off the court's veins. Elders nodded sagely, young Lupari pups in wolf form yipping excitedly around Elias's legs. One elder, a wizened woman with tattoos of ancient runes, stepped forward to examine the Heartstone. "Pure once more," she murmured, placing it on a central pedestal where it nestled into a cradle of glowing crystal. Energy pulsed outward, the runes on the walls brightening, the geothermal pools bubbling with renewed vigor. Lyra placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. Her touch conveyed gratitude and authority. "You have proven worthy, human. The betrayer, my son, is no more, his corruption excised. The realms owe you a debt." But her expression turned grave. "Yet your own debt looms. The pact sealed in blood demands balance. A life saved requires a fragment given." Elias felt the chill stir within him, the curse's remnants coiling like frost on a windowpane. What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with apprehension. The pack fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing upon them all. KL stepped beside him, his golden eyes meeting Elias's.
"Sacrifice a soul fragment," he said solemnly. "Not your life, but a piece of your essence, willingly offered. It is the price of the bond, the equilibrium restored. In return, you gain boons beyond mortal measure." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elias's mind raced back to the Pact's invocation, the moment his blood mingled with KL during the rescue, the invisible thread that had pulled him into this odyssey. He thought of his old life, the betrayals that had driven him north, the pains that had hollowed him out. Seattle's rainy streets, Sarah's loving gaze turning to disdain, the courtroom's sterile finality as their marriage dissolved, the corporate grind, soul-crushing meetings, the boss's smug grin as he stole everything. Betrayals that had festered like open wounds, driving him to isolation in the Alaskan wilds. "These pains," Elias whispered, "they've defined me too long. Let them go. The memories of betrayal, the bitterness, let them go." KL placed his hands on Elias's temples. The touch ignited an energy flow. "As you will it," he intoned. The chant swelled, the pool's waters glowing. Elias felt a pull, a gentle unraveling as threads of his soul detached. Visions flashed, the pains manifesting as dark chains, snapping one by one, dissolving into light. Pain surged briefly, reliving the heartaches in compressed agony, then ebbed, leaving a void filled with warmth. In exchange, gifts flooded him, communion with nature, an intuitive bond to the wild's rhythms, whispers of wind, songs of rivers, the pulse of the earth. Vitality surged, extending his lifespan, mending old scars, infusing him with Lupari resilience. He saw glimpses of a longer life, seasons blending, the aurora his eternal companion. As the ritual concluded, Elias arose, transformed, lighter yet stronger. The pack bowed in respect, Lyra's eyes gleaming with approval. "The balance is restored. You are kin now, Elias Thorne, guardian in your own right." Farewells followed, poignant and profound. The pack gathered, sharing tokens, a rune-carved amulet from an elder, a feather cloak from a young shifter. KL, shifting back to Wolf, nuzzled Elias's hand. "The pact is fulfilled," he said mentally, "but the wild calls to those who listen. We may meet again." Elias embraced the moment, gratitude swelling. "Thank you for everything." With the heartstones secured, he stepped through the parting ice veil, the snowmobile awaiting outside. The journey home blurred, the wilderness now alive to him, trees whispering welcomes, animals watching curiously. At the cabin, he arrived changed, no longer trapping for survival, but protecting the land. Full moons brought howls, dreams of golden-eyed visits. The debt paid, but mysteries lingered.
Epilogue: Eternal Vigil. The journey back from the hidden den unfolded like a dream receding into memory, the Alaskan wilderness welcoming Elias Thorne with open, snow-draped arms. The snowmobile's engine hummed a steady rhythm as he traversed the familiar, yet transformed landscape, the curse's chill now a distant echo, replaced by a vibrant pulse of life that coursed through his veins. The Pact's repayment had left him irrevocably changed, not just in body, with a vitality that made him feel decades younger, but in spirit. The memories of betrayal, once sharp as shards of ice, had been surrendered to the ritual, transmuted into gifts, an intuitive communion with nature, where the wind whispered secrets, the rivers sang ancient ballads, and the earth shared its hidden rhythms. No longer a mere trapper eking out survival, Elias had become a guardian, bound to safeguard the wild that had once been his refuge. As the cabin came into view, nestled on its rise overlooking the Yukon River, a sense of homecoming washed over him, mingled with a profound shift. The log structure, with its sod-insulated walls and smoke curling lazily from the chimney he had left the fire banked low, seemed smaller, yet more alive. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the subtle sounds of the forest, the distant call of a raven, the rustle of pine needles in the breeze, the faint gurgle of the river beneath its icy crust. Dismounting, Elias stretched, feeling the enhanced strength in his limbs, the clarity in his mind. Home, he murmured, but the word carried new weight. This was no longer an escape from the world, but a nexus point, a threshold where mortal and mystical intertwined. Unpacking his gear, he entered the cabin, the familiar sense of wood smoke and aged pelts greeting him like old friends. Yet everything felt different. The armchair by the hearth invited him, but as he sat, stoking the fire back to life, he sensed presences beyond the visible. The flames danced with unusual vigor, casting shadows that seemed to form fleeting shapes, wolves prowling, veils shimmering. The Pact's echoes, he thought, a smile tugging at his lips. No fear now, only acceptance. The first days back blurred into a routine redefined by his transformation. Elias no longer set traps for fur or profit. Instead, he patrolled the land, a silent protector against encroachments, poachers drawn to rumors of untapped resources, loggers eyeing the ancient pines, even subtle mystical disturbances where the veil thinned. His communion with nature guided him. A sudden intuition led him to a frozen lake where a young moose calf struggled in thin ice, its cries silent but felt in his bones. With strength amplified by the Pact, he hauled it free, the animal's grateful gaze mirroring the plea he had once seen in Kale's eyes. "Balance," he whispered as he watched it bound away. In return, the wild offered sustenance, fish leaping into his nets, berries ripening out of season, as if the land itself repaid his vigilance. Nights brought the full moons, their silver glow bathing the landscape in ethereal light, stirring the primal within. Elias would step outside, the crisp air invigorating, and hear the howls, not distant echoes, but a chorus that resonated with his soul. Packs gathered at the forest's edge, their eyes gleaming in the dark, acknowledging him as kin. One night, under a particularly brilliant luna, he joined them, his voice rising in a howl that blended human and lupine, a cathartic release that echoed across the valleys. The wolves responded, circling him in a ritual of acceptance, their forms shifting briefly to reveal human silhouettes, a reminder of the Lupari's enduring watch. Dreams wove the fabric of his slumber, portals to realms beyond. Kale visited often, not as a specter, but a vivid presence, golden eyes shining in the dreamscape. They wandered spectral forests, discussing the veil's stability, sharing tales of ancient pacts. "The shadows stir anew," Kale would warn, his voice a rumble in Elias's mind. Whispers of new threats, forgotten entities awakening, mortals meddling with forbidden lore. Elias awoke invigorated, jotting notes in his grandfather's old journal, sketches of visions, dark portals cracking open, shadowy figures plotting in hidden covens, unspoken pacts binding unsuspecting souls. The mystery endured, a tantalizing thread that pulled at Elias's curiosity. Whispers reached him through the wind, rumors from Tanana villagers of strange lights in the woods, animals behaving unnaturally, dreams plaguing the elders. One evening, a local shaman visited, an Athabascan elder with weathered face and knowing eyes. "You have the mark of the spirit wolves," he said, sipping tea by the fire. "The old stories live in you now, but beware, new pacts form in the shadows, debts unpaid from forgotten times." Elias shared fragments of his journey, the elder nodding sagely. "The wild calls guardians like you. Listen and act." Seasons turned, Elias's longer life unfolding like an extended tapestry. Spring brought thaws, rivers swelling with meltwater, and he communed with awakening nature, planting protective wards, runes learned from Lupari elders, to strengthen local veil points. Summer tourists arrived, but now he guided them with deeper insight, sharing sanitized tales of the land's mysteries, steering them from sacred sites. Autumn's colors painted the forests in fiery hues, harvests abundant under his watchful eye.
Winter returned, the aurora his nightly companion, dancing with messages from afar. Yet the whispers grew insistent, hints of emerging threats, a distant corporation drilling into ancient grounds, unleashing bound shadows, rogue shifters allying with darkness, mortals discovering pact rituals in old tomes. Elias dreamed of Kale more frequently, the wolf urging preparation. "The eternal vigil continues," Kale said in one vision, standing atop a snowy peak. "You are the bridge. Ready yourself for what comes." Elias embraced his role, training in solitude, honing pact gifts, meditating by the river to attune with the Vale's hum. Allies emerged, local wildlife responding to his call, villagers seeking his counsel, even fleeting Lupari visitors in dreams or disguise. The mystery lingered, a promise of unspoken adventures, pacts yet to be forged or fulfilled. In the quiet moments, by the hearth with whiskey in hand, Elias reflected on his transformation, from broken man to eternal guardian. The debt paid, but the wild's call eternal, whispers of new horizons beckoning. The reckoning ended, the vigil had just begun.